I was able to stack up 14,594 points for damage arc enemies using light impact grenades during a night raid on Stellamontis. Now for this challenge, there are a couple of perks in the skill tree that I'd recommend you consider getting to make this a little bit easier for you. The first is in-round crafting, which will enable you to create the light impact grenades while you're topside. The second perk I'd recommend is Broad Shoulders, which increases the maximum weight you can carry and will enable you to bring in far more materials before you're over encumbered. And then the last perk is a little bit less significant, but still does help, is Loaded Arms, which your equipped firearm has less impact on your encumbrance. Now for my equipment, I brought in an anvil with 2 stacks of ammo, a couple of light shields, 2 stacks of healing and shielding items, 5 stacks of adrenaline shots, but you can probably get away with just 2. I also brought in a photoelectric cloak, zip lines, and a snap hook, and I didn't use any of those either, so you can swap those out for light impact grenades or anything else that may be valuable to you. I brought in 4 stacks of light impact grenades, 6 stacks of chemicals, and 4 stacks of plastic parts. The chemicals and plastic parts is enough to essentially create 100 light impact grenades while you're topside. And while that may feel like a lot, it's really not. You end up going through them super quick. Now, once you spawn in, you want to head for the major areas where you can find shredders. The areas where you're going to find the highest volume of shredders is the medical bay, robotic sandbox, and cultural archives. Runners up is the lobby and atrium, which will both have 2, but the others will usually have 3 shredders roaming at any point in the game. For the strategy here, essentially what you want to do is use your light impact grenades on shredders and sentry turrets. Outside of that, I don't really recommend using them even for like fireballs and pops unless you're in like a jam and need to use it to get yourself out of something where you might take some damage. But otherwise, I'd recommend using your anvil to clean up those pops, fireballs, and those ticks that you're going to find throughout this match. Essentially, those smaller arc enemies will give you points when you do light impact grenade them, but it's insignificant in terms of how much you get when you throw one at a sentry turret or you throw one at a shredder. The sentry turrets will give you 160 points or a little bit more or a little bit less. The points do fluctuate just a little bit. So when you find this shredder, I do recommend paying attention to smaller arc enemies that are in the area and use your anvil to take them out before you engage the shredder. You don't want these little enemies roaming around while you're sitting there with your grenades out because they can create a lot of havoc for you if you allow them to roam for free. Now, hitting the shredder with the light impact grenades is a little bit challenging. Their movement is super fluid and they tend to like to move right as you try and wind up to throw a grenade. So I do recommend playing a little patient up front to get the feel of how they're moving and to how much you need to lead them to make sure that your grenades hit consistently. Shredders will close the distance and try and get as close to you as possible. Be careful when you are throwing grenades to a shredder that is doing that. You can take pretty significant self damage if it's too close to you when you throw that grenade. There is an animation bug that you'll run into. If you try and throw another impact grenade too quickly after you've thrown one, your character will essentially do the throwing animation again, but you won't actually throw a grenade. This will also delay your ability to throw your next grenade, so be aware of that and try and be patient and let the animation fully finish before you try and wind up your second throw. Now, in general, you want to aim for the thrusters. Try and get all of your grenades to hit, and it should take them out in anywhere from 4 to 6 impact grenades, depending on how well you threw them. As you are fighting the shredders, make sure you pick something that you can rotate around in 360 degrees to protect yourself from its blast. You don't want to get yourself stuck in a corner because that is the easiest way for you to get eliminated by a shredder. Now at first, during this run, I essentially tried to rotate the entire map like I normally do for the shredder challenge, but what I found was way more effective towards the back half of the game was just rotating between the cultural archives and the robotic sandboxes. Now, part of the balance here is that you're going to have to do in-round crafting to create a bunch of grenades, and that just takes a bunch of time to get done. I tried to essentially juggle it by creating only a handful of grenades up front and then essentially using the ones that I had and then crafting more, trying to reduce the amount of time that I was sitting there crafting. But what I'd actually recommend doing is finding a little safe spot and then crafting up as many as you possibly can with the space that you have available in your bag, and then continuing on your route. You have a lot more time in the round than it feels like going into it. You end up using these impact grenades super fast and you'll run out a lot faster than you think you will. So you'll end up needing to spend some time farming in the later part of the round, which means you can afford to take a little bit of time early on to just sit there and do the crafting that you need to make sure that you have as many grenades as possible. From here, essentially what you want to do is just rotate between shredder spawn locations, farming the shredders with your impact grenades, and taking out these smaller enemies with your anvil or other primary weapon that you brought in. There will come a point though where you're going to run out of your light impact grenades. The best place that I know of to get yourself a bunch of plastic parts and chemicals on this map is the Cultural Archives. Breach and search the wooden boxes that are scattered throughout that entire area. Inside of them, you'll find a lot of very basic materials like fabric, chemicals, plastic parts, and even some metal parts. They usually come in stacks of 5 to 10, so farming throughout that area can usually give you enough resources to craft a bunch more grenades to continue on with your rotation. Outside of that, there isn't a ton more to this challenge. Throw as many impact grenades as you possibly can, and then make sure you head for the extraction to hit the button before it reaches 0. Once you've stacked up enough eliminations and you're happy with your score, head back to Speranza, collect any loot if you haven't already, and watch your score fly up the leaderboard. That's going to be it for me today, y'all. Thanks for watching.